Mr. Kealoha?
Kamahana Kealoha here. Aloha.
Aloha.
Thank you, Mr. White, for your patience, and I want to thank everybody else, too, for your presence. And aloha. I'm appearing pro se, so please bear with me. If I'm doing something wrong, I'm sure somebody will point it out, so mahalo ahead of time. Give me 1 second. I hope it helps, but for my questioning, I'll be referencing Exhibit A1, the Conservation District Use Application, Exhibit A55, the Cultural Impact Assessment, I believe that's called, and the third one, which would just back up the laws I'm going to bring up, which would be my exhibits, but I don't think I need an exhibit for the law. Well, we'll see. I want to clarify one thing. Earlier, I was told to turn off my camera during when you broke the hearing, so I was confused about that because, like, when we're out of plenary, certain rules don't apply. So I don't know if that's the same here. Could you?
I'm sorry. What did you say?
I'm only familiar with legislative Roberts rules. When we're out of plenary, usually. The normal rules of the public apply, so I was confused about that with the filming when we broke for the hearing on break.
Yes, you might remember way back we said we're going to follow the Supreme Court rule on recordation of the proceedings and what have you. So in the course of this case, at least in our forum, I am not going to allow recordation for the reasons that I have already stated. But does that have to do with your questions of this witness, or?
No, not at all. I didn't know when else I would address that, so Kalamai.
Okay,
Even
sorry.
during I don't know if you gavelled us out or whatever you call that.
We were in recess, during the lunch recess.
So even during recess?
Right.
Okay, got it.
Thank you, Mr. Kealoha.
I also want to make a motion for consideration that even though you may feel that we have had enough time to prepare, and I've been lucky to have another day, I would request that I would need more time on behalf of myself and maybe anybody else who supports that to prepare for this, like a whole 24 hours at least.
To prepare for what?
Cross-examination of the witnesses. We can read ahead of time, but then what's actually happening here is a totally different animal to me. And just want to put that out there.
This is not an easy process. I totally understand.
Can my motion be received?
It is a lot, but this witness has been testifying since last week. So we've had quite a bit of time for everyone, and because you're later in the cross-examination, you had even a little extra time.
I understand.
So, and then in addition to which, we agreed that we would give everybody at least 48 hours. So, you know, already there were people that were scheduled to testify today that you should be prepared to cross-examine.
Yes, and I don't know the measure of it all, how you're gauging it, but I'm just putting my protest forward because it's not enough time for me.
Okay. I hear you.
Okay, so moving on. Kalamai. Mahalo. So, Mr. Perry Wright, I believe you stated when you first started your examination, and aloha again, that you were an expert in land use, planning, and analysis, or was it your lawyer that mentioned that? Is that true?
What I say is that I'm a planner in my testimony.
Okay, I verbally heard something else. So when you say planner, does that pertain to land use and analysis?
Yes, we prepare permit applications. We do a lot of environmental planning.
Got it. Could you define land use according to your expertise and in this situation?
Land use is decision-making about what one does on land, so it has a whole variety of aspects to it.
Sounds self-explanatory. Are you aware, or have you seen the, I don't know if this is the first question I should ask, but I'm trying to lay a foundation, like you said. Have you seen the land title to these lands?
Personally, no.
Okay. Do you know if these lands are within the inventory of the so-called state of Hawaii?
The inventory of the state, it's not a term
There's a question to you. Do you know if these lands are in an inventory? Yes or no?
I don't understand. No.
You don't know?
I don't understand what inventory he's referring to. That's what I didn't understand. And I was trying just clarification for that.
He didn't understand your question.
Well, when an entity owns something, usually they have an inventory of it somewhere, and I was asking if you're familiar with any such inventory.
There is a tax map key number for the parcel, so I'm assuming that it's registered.
So have you seen the tax map key, the actual form?
I have seen a tax map, a copy of a tax map.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Where did the boundaries of your CDUA and CIA come from?
The CDUA is tied to a tax map key number, which is related to the university's lease of the land, I believe.
So how did you know where to begin the survey and where to end it within boundaries? Have you seen boundaries?
I've seen a map. I didn't draw the map.
So you don't? How can you do an assessment on a land parcel if you don't have boundaries for them? Like as far as this is where the boundary of the specific parcel ends, where they're going to build, and this is where it begins, and this is where they meet, and this is how long it goes, and how much land it encompasses. How do you do an assessment without boundaries, or do you have those boundaries?
I just said that there is a boundary. It's the tax map key, so there's a parcel number.
Okay, Kalamai.
And there is also a boundary to the observatory precinct.
Could you describe the total land encompassed in these boundaries, the amount?
In round numbers, the parcel is 11,200 plus acres. The observatory precinct is 525 acres, approximately.
Mahalo. On this tax map key, does it indicate the owner of these lands?
I believe it says the state of Hawaii.
All right. A tax map key, what is your understanding of the purpose of that document? Is it a deed of title?
No, it's a map, but there's typically, I don't know in this case, but typically then a deed. I don't know the circumstances of this. I don't have the document.
Do you ever verify ownership of properties you have to assess?
I did not personally verify it. No.
Is it your responsibility to make sure that your client owns the actual lands that you have to assess?
I don't think so.
So anybody could come to you and ask you to make an assessment on erroneous lands and you don't verify ownership or authority?
If I looked around and I didn't see things falling into place, like finding the names on the TMKs, I would start to ask questions. But in this case, everything fit. I believed what I've been told.
When you say everything fit,
I didn't see any inconsistencies.
how about today, now, after the line of questionings? Do you see any inconsistencies?
No.
Thank you. Just a second. You mentioned in your previous testimonies, and I can just quote it, and tell me if I'm correct. As a result, I'm well acquainted with the project and with the contents of the CDUA. Do you remember saying that? You were well acquainted with the project and with the contents of the CDUA?
Yes.
Being well acquainted doesn't not include in your perspective confirming land title?
Maybe I don't understand the question. Could you just repeat it once more?
Confirming land title is not part of your acquaintance with, I mean, you call yourself well acquainted, yet you don't seem to have confirmed land title. And so I'm questioning whether land title is part of that assessment of yourself, that you're well acquainted with the CDUA and CIA.
I already said I did not personally go back to check the land titles.
So would you withdraw your statement that you're well acquainted?
No.
Okay. Interesting. 1 second. The conclusion you proposed or that you finalized is that there's no significant impact to the area. Is that correct?
The words that you're talking about are those from the environmental impact statement. We described the effects that there would be within the conservation district, and we discussed the consistency with the conservation district objectives.
So you wouldn't say there's no significant impact?
If you're asking for me
Professionally?
Professionally, I looked at the EIS and have concluded that this would not have significant, this project would not have significant adverse effects.
Okay. Could you describe again the cultural component of the CDUA and the EIS? How does the cultural assessment fit into the CDUA and the EIS?
Well, I can talk about the CDUA, and there's a section within the application that discusses cultural resources. It describes historic properties and traditional and customary practices, the historic properties that are present, the cultural practices that seemed relevant to the proposed project, the impacts on those, and on customary Native Hawaiian rights.
How much does
all of that is in this document.
Mahalo. How much does that weigh on the total decision for the CDUA to be put through?
It is the board that makes the decision. I can't answer that question.
Okay.
How they would weigh it.
You make the assessment, though. How does that weigh in on your assessment? Do you not make the assessment? I'm sorry.
It's one of the factors we considered, and we laid out what we thought would.
Could you quantify that or tell us?
No, I'm not able to quantify it.
So it could be anywhere from 0.009% that it matters to, I mean, like, is there a window? Is there guidelines for how much the cultural impact assessment counts towards your total assessment?
Not that I'm aware of.
So it's left to your discretion?
It's not left to it's the board's discretion when they decide whether or not to issue a permit once they've been given all of the information after considering the application and all the supporting documents.
Let's talk about your recommendation, though, because how much does it matter in your personal recommendation? How do you factor that in? Because you recommend this. You make a recommendation to the board. It's not just the board making their own decision. They count on you.
Yes.
So how do you quantify or include this cultural assessment into your recommendation?
I try to balance. I cannot put a number to that, but we tried to look at all sides and to look at the things that were being done on the plus side of the ledger. So
sounds erroneous. Would you say it was erroneous?
I wouldn't say it was erroneous. No.
Okay.
Sustained. Please don't argue with the witness.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You may ask a question, though.
I don't know how to. I didn't mean to argue. How would you, if it's not erroneous? I'm not understanding how it factors into your recommendation still. Could you maybe expand how the cultural assessment is included and affects your recommendation? Because you can't quantify it, you said.
I said I can't quantify it. That's true.
Could you describe it then in your own words?
Sure. We tried to look at the cultural practices and other values that would be affected by this project, and in the overall context of those, decide whether or not that would disqualify this project from receiving, not just the project, but the request for a permit from receiving approval by the board. And on balance, our conclusion was that it did not.
How do you, to prevent bias, for example, how do you assess a culture that you might not practice in this situation? How did you go about that?
I don't know how to answer that question.
Are you an expert on Hawaiian cultural practice?
No.
Was anybody on your team for the recommendation an expert on Hawaiian cultural practice?
There was extensive discussion of that within the EIS, and that's where the team was, and that's where we drew information from.
And where do you justify these expertise on Hawaiian cultural practice? I'm just still trying to understand how you can assess a culture that you yourself might not practice. You just guess? Oh, that's a question.
No.
Do you just guess?
No, we didn't just guess. We looked at the information that had been gathered throughout the planning, environmental impact statement process, and tried to summarize that in the application.
So you don't bring in practitioners to sit with you and make that decision?
I was not personally part of that whole process that took place during the preparation of the environmental impact statement when all of those materials were being prepared, discussed. So I'm not the one who's in a position to answer the questions you're asking.
Just a minute. Are you asking him about the preparation of the EIS or the preparation of his own report?
His report and his recommendation. I'm sorry.
So he's asking you whether you brought in a cultural practitioner to consult with as you wrote your report, or did your report?
We did not separately bring in a cultural practitioner as we wrote the report.
Okay. Your expertise are in business management. It says on your land tenure. I mean, it says on
Business
your,
no.
Is that wrong? I'm asking. I'm sorry.
That's incorrect.
Just a second.
I have a master's degree in regional planning with an emphasis on the environmental aspects of that from the University of Pennsylvania.
Sorry. Regional planning, teaching certificate, and a BA in history and economics. I might have got business from that, so that's not what I meant. I don't see anything here that says that you're an expert on anything cultural or cultural assessment. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. Do you think that is problematic? Making an assessment that includes cultural impact and not having an expert and you not being an expert? Do you think that's problematic?
No, I don't. We have information here on air quality impacts, on noise impacts. I'm not an expert in any of those things. We try to draw as well as we can on the information that's contained in reports prepared by others. So.
And how do you get chosen for this recommendation?
You would have how did we get chosen?
How did you end up being the person
to prepare the document?
Yeah, to make a recommendation to the board.
We were asked to put together the application by the university through.
And when you say asked, was this a lottery? Did you bid for it?
I don't know what you mean.
Or did they hand pick you?
I don't know the process that they went through.
Objection, calling for speculation.
Sir,
I think it's important.
I'm going to sustain the objection. We can't ask him to guess about what somebody else's reasoning or thinking was.
Okay, I'm sorry. So you did not bid for this, and you did not have to compete with other of the same expertise for this kuleana.
Do you know?
I did not bid for it. I assume there was a competition, but I don't know.
I'm just interested in whether...
You got your answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I even ask him to expand on that and tell me how it went down, how you got, how they called you, how they called upon you?
If you know.
I don't know all what went into their calling.
Did you get an email? Did you get a phone call? I'm serious.
Actually, I don't recall.
Okay, moving on. You said that you were aware of burials today
Yes.
on the Mauna. Would burials and or burial grounds be considered cultural?
Certainly there's a cultural aspect to that.
Would they be considered spiritual or religious?
Typically.
Now, you use the word typically, and I want to understand the distinction. What do you mean by typically?
Commonly, very often, yes.
In this case?
Probably.
How involved were you in the Conservation District use application? Because you say probably, but
No.
I think earlier you said that you were very well acquainted.
Yes.
So is it yes or no? I think probably is kind of...
But no, but the probably was,
Yeah, he's given you an answer already. If you want him to expand on that, you can ask
Sorry, I'm
that,
trying.
but I know, and you're doing fine. So if you want him to expand on that, but you can't argue with him.
Okay.
Okay.
I didn't know we were arguing. Okay, so I kind of want you to expand on that.
would you please restate the question?
Right. Give me a second.
Sure.
Kind of broke my train of thought. Would the court reporter be able to help me out with what my exact wording was? I'm sorry to ask. It had to do with the burials and, okay.
How involved were you in the Conservation District use application? When you said probably, I think earlier you said you were very well acquainted. And you said yes, and you said, so it is a general, I think probably it's kind of, you said no, but probably, and then you said.
Okay, let me reword that then. When you say probably, it leads me to believe that you were not very well acquainted. Would you like to change your answer?
I had not intended my probably to refer to involved in the preparation of the Conservation District use application. If that's what I said, I misspoke on that. I was very involved in that.
Now back to the burials. Earlier, when you were asked who I don't know the exact wording, but it was a question about who defines or who defines culturally appropriate. Do you remember what your answer was?
Not precisely, no.
What would be your answer now? Who defines culturally appropriate?
I think different people define what is culturally appropriate in different ways. So everybody has their own definition.
Excuse me, before we get too far off track, if you can set the context of what you're asking, who defines culturally appropriate in what context?
Okay, who defines culturally appropriate in terms of your recommendation, in terms of the 8 criteria?
I'm sorry, I can't. I don't know how to tell you who defines it. I don't know what you mean.
What standards do you use to define culturally appropriate? Because I think you use the terminology, right? Culturally appropriate?
I don't actually recall using the term culturally appropriate, but
my mistake then. A cultural, did you have anything to do with the CIA and the cultural assessment, or did you just use it as a reference?
just used it as a reference.
And how did you verify its validity? Did you vet its facts?
I didn't.
Okay, thank you. Are burials, back again to that question, what was your answer to the question, are burials spiritual or religious?
I don't recall. I mean, burials are bodies placed in the ground. What people attach to them can have spiritual significance, it can have religious significance. I don't understand what you're asking me.
How do you incorporate that in your assessment of cultural and spiritual?
We discussed in the application information that we'd drawn from other sources about burials.
So purely, and what sources are these that you have used?
What sort?
What sources are these that you have used? I see you've used Paul Madley's 2005 Mauna Kea cultural assessment. I see that referenced in your CDUA. Is that right?
Yes, there were a whole, and off the top of my head, I can't dredge up all the references, I apologize. But we tried to review the available materials.
So the CIA prepared in support of the environmental impact statement, the CDUA.
No, the CIA was prepared in support of the environmental impact statement.
Which in turn supports your assessment.
Yes,
And also
but it was done before we did this.
2005.
Pardon?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just guessing. When before?
Probably, I don't know the exact date, but it was finished months, if not a year before.
Including the 2005 Mali and Mali cultural research project, in your assessment, I see that they have identified a range of ongoing cultural practices, and I'll try to pull them up for you right now. They're also listed in the bibliography of the cultural impact assessment.
To the extent that the cross-examiner is asking about a specific document, we ask that it be shown to the witness.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
I'm asking if the Mali and Mali 2005 document that the CDUA says was included, I'm not asking, I'm asking well, yes I am. I'm asking if he's familiar, as he says he's well acquainted with.
What the application...
Sir, just a minute, please. I'm asking...
Sorry, and I'm just trying to do this the right way. But,
Sir, so there's a specific document? Is there an exhibit number or something that we can show the witness so he can see the same thing you're looking at?
Yes, there is. And just a second, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Thank you for the guidance. Exhibit A001 is the CDUA. In it, on page 4 through 5, the document by Mali and Mali is referenced. So I'm talking about Exhibit 1, the CDUA, pages 4 through 5, in 4.14, sorry, section 4.14.
Yes.
Do you have that at hand?
Yes, I do.
So the way it works is you'll be able to ask about that Exhibit A1, but if you want to ask about the Mali and Mali report, that has to be also shown to this witness. So I'm not sure what you want to ask about.
I want to ask how the burial assessment in that report was taken into consideration, if or if not it was.
You mean the Malley and Malley report?
Yes.
Okay, so you need to show him the Malley and Malley report.
Could I request that we also have an Elmo up here? Is that what that's called? The projector?
I'm old, I don't know that.
Because I do have it here, and I could show it to you. And oh, yeah, something to facilitate what you're requiring, which is showing what we're talking about. And because it's part of the CDUA, I didn't think I'd have to bring my own copies, but it's an exhibit.
Yeah, all I'm saying is if you want to ask him about the Malley and Malley report, that's what you have to show him.
Okay. Is there a way to project my computer from here?
The thing that
Could I sit next to him and put this, prop this up? I mean, you got security all over. We're good. I'm not trying to get kicked out. I'm trying to stay. Nah, but you know.
So you don't have a hard copy is what it is.
I'm sorry, I don't. I'm hundreds of miles away from my printer at home.
You don't have to apologize.
And I apologize.
But maybe if you can refer us to the exhibit, we might have it.
It can be found online at Ulukau, which is a public site. If anybody, I don't think he has a computer though.
But it's not in the exhibits?
Not on its own, but it's referenced by these exhibits, by this exhibit, Exhibit 1. And as such, I would think it was germane.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to ask your questions based on this exhibit. But if you're going to ask this witness about the Malley and Malley report itself, you know, then he should have the opportunity to see what you're talking about. That's all. So go ahead and ask your questions.
Well, my questions would be quoting the Malley and Malley report and asking him how it got incorporated, if at all.
Oh, so you're
in his
asking about the
assessment.
report itself.
Yeah, and I don't know what the remedies would be, but I have it here. I can plug my computer in. I can print it and bring it tomorrow if you'd let me come back.
Under duress and coercion?
Yes. Well, I've explained it to you. I'm sorry. Okay. Phew. This is what I mean when I need more time.
Yeah, we can't do this. I'll tell you what, why don't we take
It is an exhibit.
can we take a 5-minute break?
Thank you.
And then maybe you can organize your exhibits, and then we'll come back and pick up where we left
I
off.
appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Oh. Okay, let's resume, please.
Come put it back on the page you want.
We have the,
It has fallen over. I just want to make sure it's where you want it.
Does this thing turn more? Can I tilt it more?
Well, I mean, we can do this. No, we can do this. But the page number on here, I want it where you want it.
Wasn't it taller? So I'll just put it on here. Let me talk from R1 dash page 2. This one right here. To R1 dash page 3. Or no, sorry. I'll tell you which one. R1 dash page 4. So those two. R1 dash page 2 and R1 dash page 4. I'll come and change it for you.
Okay.
I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Almost ready. And we're ready. Okay, let's start right there. And if you want to verify where it comes from, just scroll down, 2 fingers.
Yeah.
I'll try to help you out with that. And thank you all for your patience. Oh. It'd almost be better if I could just sit right here.
He, of course, has all of
I almost think it'd be faster if I walk back and forth and just put this underneath there.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, it has, I mean, that's my suggestion.
Don't worry about that. I appreciate your accommodation to all of us.
I appreciate
So we have Mr. Perry White resuming the stand and continued cross-examination by Mr. Kealoha. So Mr. Kealoha, you want to go forward?
Yes, I do. Back to the burial topic. I want to ask Mr. White, do you speak Hawaiian?
No, I do not.
Do you have any burials on the Mauna in your own genealogy that you know of?
No.
Can you describe how you assess burials, rites, practices, and mitigation?
I don't typically do that.
Was burials taken into your account for your assessment and your recommendation?
Reports that we referenced in here do consider burials?
Absolutely. One of those reports I noticed is Malley and Malley 2005. Does that ring a bell?
Yes.
Okay. In your CDUA, page 4 to 8, now in the CDUA, Exhibit 1, 4.2.5, subtitled Burial Blessings. Are we there?
Yes.
It states, and I'm taking it out of the sentence, human burials can no longer occur on Mauna Kea under state law. Some descendants currently take part in blessing ceremonies within the MKSR to honor their ancestors. Are you there with me?
I am.
Can you confirm that's what it says?
That's what it says.
Okay. The other comment in that same section claims the site of the proposed TMT observatory is over 1 mile from the nearest known or possible burial identified during past archaeological studies. No specific sites have been documented as associated with burial blessing ceremonies within the Northern Plateau. As a result, the project is not anticipated to have substantial adverse effects on any burial blessing practices occurring on Mauna Kea and would not impact this traditional and customary Native Hawaiian rite. Is that a statement that you recommended to the board?
That's the statement. You quoted correctly from this report.
Okay. Now, you acknowledge using Malley and Malley 2005 as part of your assessment.
Malley and Malley was one of the references that was used in all of those reports that went into this, including the Comprehensive Management.
Yes, and I'm going to take this up to you and ask you how it was. Give me one moment. I don't know if we can enlarge it, but oh, I see. Thank you. Okay, we're going to try to be careful this time, but I'm going to bring it up to you, and we won't touch it.
We won't. I won't anyway.
Now, this is Exhibit R1 from my own exhibits, and this is also the reference you use for your assessment.
What it says here is the CMP and the Cultural Impact Assessment prepared in support of the Environmental Impact Statement for the TMP project, as well as earlier studies, have identified a range of ongoing cultural practices and beliefs involving Mauna Kea that have origins.
Mr. White, excuse me. He's just asking about that document, I think.
And I was trying to read from the portion of the application that references that.
And he's asking you if you use this document that he's showing you on the overhead.
And what I was trying to say was that we use documents that use that document. So I did not personally review this document.
Okay. So maybe you could answer that way, and then we can...
We could. I apologize.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to be clear so that we have clear answers to the questions that you are able to answer.
Are you able to see the writing on that? Oh, sorry. Were you done?
The highlighted one?
It starts with Elena. It's the larger block. I can read it to you if you can't see it.
I can see one burial features extending from the summit to the lowland. Is that the one?
Yes, please. If you can read that, I know it's
To the lowlands. Specific mention is made in several important historical accounts recorded by both Native witnesses and non-Hawaiians of the presence of burials in the Pu'u and summit plateau of Mauna Kea. The remains of individuals who share ties to Mauna Kea are still taken to the various Pu'u on Mauna Kea for interment.
My concern is the very first sentence. Elena, burial features extending from the summit to the lowlands. What does that mean to you?
It says that there are at least some in the lowlands and there are at least some in the summit area.
You use the word some, and how do you justify that? It could be
I was trying to
plethora, yeah? Oh, sorry. Why did you choose to use the word some? Are you
Summit? It's. I was reading from the first line there.
I'm sorry. Let me be clear. It's my fault. Some. You said some in the lowlands and some in the mountainous areas. Is that right?
That's correct.
And where do you deduce? Is that the right word? Some.
Well, it says.
Shucks. Okay, bottom line, was this included in your assessment, this particular statement?
I don't recall.
Because it seems to say the opposite of what you're saying. You keep injecting the word some. Is there a reason for that?
Objection, argumentative.
Overruled. I can't even get it. I don't understand the answer anymore. So could you ask the question? I'm sorry, Mr. Kealoha.
He said his understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that some burials were located in the summit area and some burials were located in the lowlands.
All I was trying to do is to read from this, and it says that it extends. It doesn't talk about the distribution, so...
Yeah. I'm concerned about the deduction that it's some. It sounds like there's less. Is that what you're implying?
Oh, not at all. I don't know the distribution, so...
Okay.
This simply says that there's some that are at the summit and some in the lowlands. And presumably all throughout.
Come on.
But,
I don't see the word some is my contention, and I just want to know where that comes from and why.
It comes from the fact that if it was only at the summit area, it wouldn't have said from the lowlands to the summit. So I was not trying to draw any
Okay, I see. So perhaps many, would you say, or perhaps less?
This doesn't tell me.
Okay. The next, and to me, this is a direct contention with the statement in your CDUA. Let's go back to the CDUA just a second. Sorry. Thank you for your patience. Where on pages 4 through 8 under burial blessings,
You're talking on a page, but section?
Wait, he hasn't asked a question yet.
sorry. Thank you for this time, and give me 1 second. I want to make sure I ask this question right. Human burials can no longer occur on Mauna Kea under state law, page 4 through 8, 4.25 CDUA Exhibit 1. Same pages, same exhibit, CDUA also states that the TMT observatory is over 1 mile from the nearest known or possible burial. Could you kind of expand on nearest known? Are you implying that there may be more?
I wasn't implying anything.
Okay, why the specific wording, the nearest known burials, instead of no burials?
Because I don't know what I don't know. We're trying to say, based on the information that we had, there were no known burials there. There may be burials no one knew about. We're not qualified to judge that.
There very much may be. Mahalo. Are you familiar with Act 171?
No.
This assessment was composed, or the recommendation conservation district use application was composed in what year? 10.
This application was 2010?
2010, 6 years ago.
Yes.
And you're not familiar with Act 171 recently passed in 2015?
No.
Concerning Hawaiian burials?
No.
Am I allowed to make him aware of that?
No.
Even though it's directly opposed to what the assessment says?
You get to ask the questions of this witness based on what he has knowledge of.
Okay. Can I let him know what he's not aware of?
I think you just did.
And what it is, what it says exactly?
Well, you're welcome to argue it later on as part of your argument.
Okay, because
But we need to move on from
thank you
171.
for that acknowledgement, because it shows that he's not aware of 171 and it was not taken into his assessment. Can I say that?
Well, you can ask him the follow-up question, which is,
Help me.
I think what you're asking is, okay, you're not aware of 171, therefore it's
Okay.
not been taken into
Thank you.
account in your 2010
So what
report.
was that statement about Hawaiian burials not being legal based on in 2010?
I don't know the specific reference.
Okay. Are you aware that laws change?
Yes?
Okay. Why are we using a 2010 assessment in 2016?
We're reading from the 2010 application.
Is there a statute of time before an assessment may not be valid anymore?
I am not aware of any such law.
So would you be able to use an assessment from 2001 or 1901 for this?
I just told you I'm not aware.
Speculation?
It's overruled, it's argumentative.
How do I ask
Do
this?
not answer, I strike the response.
So you're acknowledging you're not aware of any statutes, is that correct?
No, he was not aware of Act 171 or whatever the question was that you asked about statutes.
So
He didn't say he doesn't know any statutes.
yeah. So there's no are there any guidelines that would regulate how old an assessment is that you can use for your recommendation to the board?
I'm not aware of any.
Is 6 years a significant amount of time for an assessment to change?
It's not a matter of years. It depends totally on the situation.
In this situation, is 6 years a substantive amount of time for a new environmental impact statement to be valid, to be called for, to be needed?
Objection beyond the scope of direct.
I'm going to sustain that objection. You're asking him about some hypothetical updated report or whether it should be updated, but that's outside the scope of what his direct testimony is. His direct testimony is about the 2010 report that he did.
Are environmental impact statements subject to change based on new information?
Objection. Outside the scope of direct.
Yeah, it's the same thing you're trying to get to, but he really should not be testifying about that.
Can I ask if when new information becomes available, how does that affect the assessment whenever it was made, if at all?
Are you talking about when you say the assessment, I'm not sure what assessment you're referring to.
The assessment you made to get to your recommendation to the board. Sorry.
I was not aware of any change that was relevant.
Is there a process set up if new information does become available? For example, those unknown burials, or perhaps not existing, becoming being discovered. How does that equate into a 2010 assessment? Is there a process set up for that to be amended?
I don't know.
That's a good answer. Are you familiar with Lilinois?
The feature?
What is your understanding of Lilinois?
I've seen it as a geographical reference.
What is your understanding of Kukaha'ula?
I don't know what, again, it's a feature. I've seen it referenced in reports. It has other things, but I don't know how to answer your question.
What is your understanding of those two terms?
I don't know what you mean by my understanding.
How would you describe what you know of Lilinois and what you know of Kukaha'ula in your own words?
I know them as geographical features. I know them as places referenced of cultural significance. I know them as historic areas.
Are you aware of their regard some Hawaiians have for these two entities as deities?
I've read that, yes.
Are you aware of their simultaneous manifestation as a geographical, simultaneous now with their spiritual understanding of how they exist? Are you aware with that connection as far as geographical and spiritual, not being separate? Are you aware of that?
No.
Do you know their physical manifestations? And what physical manifestations? Can you describe them to me, this geographical, physical manifestations of Lilinois and Kukaha'ula?
They're pu'u in the summit area.
Are you aware of any other forms of their geographical and physical presence?
No.
Are you aware of Hawaiian cultural practice and understanding of kinolao, which are bodies of the spiritual? What you tell me, are you aware?
No.
Are you familiar with the terms ola na'iwi? These are indispensable, inseparable Hawaiian cultural beliefs. Are you familiar with the term ola na'iwi?
No.
Are you familiar with the term mai kaula'i wale ka'iwi o nā kupuna?
No.
Did any of the assessments or writings you use try to familiarize you with any of these customs and practices?
I don't remember.
Yet you say you are, what were the words?
Objection, argumentative.
I'm going to let him finish his question.
Yeah, let me rephrase that. Do you still feel like you're well acquainted with the project and with the contents of the CDUA?
Yes, but the report was written in 2010, so for me to recall many of the things you're asking about.
Would you characterize that how? Is it problematic? Is it not a problem?
It simply means that I think the report speaks for itself, and I'm not able to add details from my memory that you seem to be seeking.
So would you still insist that you're well acquainted with the Conservation District use application?
Yes, the application is a 2010.
And once again, did you know any of these Hawaiian terms I said I brought to you?
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kealoha.